Hello and welcome to this CodeRage 9 session. We're going to be looking at embedding local and remote data access into your applications with IB Lite. Now IB Lite is part of the Interbase product range, and it really is nice and easy with Interbase. You can just embed, deploy and relax, which makes it an ideal choice for mobile and desktop applications to replace local data storage that you may be using Paradox tables or other things for in the past. My name is Stephen Ball and I'm the Associate Product Manager for Interbase at Embarcadero. If you'd like to connect up with me or ask me any questions after the session, then please do feel free to email me on stephen.ball@embarcadero.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at delphiaball, or my blog post is delphiaball.co.uk. So the agenda for today is we're going to really look into what IB Lite is. We'll have a quick comparison against SQLite, which is very popular in the mobile world and growingly on desktop. We'll also have a look at what you need to do to get started using IB Lite. And then we'll look into using some components to create an application which will then connect to a local and also to a remote database. So we can actually, through a mobile application, Interbase is one of the very few database engines that you can connect directly to from a remote mobile device. There are specific use cases for that, and I certainly would encourage that for applications that you're running outside the corporate network. But certainly there are some instances where it's actually quite useful to be able to connect directly to the database. We will then finish off with the standard Q&A and summary to finish the session. So IB Lite is a free version of Interbase. It's runtime royalty free. It's provided to you with your RAD Studio, Delphi, C++ and app method licenses. And it enables you to deploy applications that use the Interbase libraries on iOS, Android, Windows and also on Mac OS X. So with coverage of those platforms, we can build a single database application that can be debugged on Windows but deployed out to iOS, Android, Windows or Mac. And that's really helpful because it means whichever platform we need to support, the data structures that we put in place and we work with will then work across all of the platforms, which means our data layer logic and setup is there to move with us wherever we want to go. As I say, IB Lite is runtime royalty free, available on Windows, OS X, iOS and Android. It's also binary compatible on all platforms, and following on from that, you can upgrade directly to Interbase to Go, which provides the encryption support and an unlimited disk space size just by changing the license file. So you can do that once the applications are deployed. It uses the same binaries that we use to produce Interbase to Go. So literally the features are there, they're just not enabled in the free edition for encryption and unlimited disk size. However, saying that, you do get a healthy 100 meg on disk included for free with IB Lite. So one of the main competitors to IB Lite is SQLite, which is quite popular. There's different versions of it deployed out onto different platforms, so there are some quirks to watch out for, but SQLite is available to access by developers on most Android and iOS platforms. There is also libraries that you can download and then distribute with your applications to provide the same kind of integration that you get from IB Lite to go out onto Windows and Mac as well. But in terms of what SQLite provides you, I think probably the best way to think of SQLite is a bit like a flat file on steroids. It's really meant for single read, single write. It doesn't fully support all the SQL92 standard. It certainly has the ability to have triggers in there that you can code and use, but it doesn't have stored procedures. So stored procedures is something you don't find in SQLite. Also, the user security within SQLite is down to the platform that it's on. So whilst the file is on the platform, on the device, then you may have some level of security if it's been implemented on the device. Certainly once that file is off the device, there's no security in there whatsoever. IB Lite has inbuilt user security, which you can use to authenticate different users to connect into the database. Now, encryption is not built into IB Lite or SQLite out of the box. There are, however, upgradable options that you can get. Obviously with IB Lite, that's purchasing Interface to Go licenses. With SQLite, then you need to purchase third-party libraries to run with your database engine. And obviously, if they only support some platforms but not all of the platforms, then you may end up with cross-platform compatibility issues with SQLite that you don't have with IB Lite. Okay, so let's move on. The first thing you need to do with IB Lite is to download the registration file, and you simply do this. You get your serial key with your products. If you just go to reg.embarcadero.com, follow the steps online just to log into your EDN account, pop in your registration serial number and choose register. Once you have it downloaded, you can then just save it onto your public documents Embarcadero interface redistribution folder, path on the screen there, and that's the default path. And then just if you just name the registration file reg_IB Lite, it's a text file already, and then once you have that there, that's the only time you need to do that. In any project that you're working with, just like most databases, you then just go and say, right, I want to enable, and you choose the Interface to Go options, and then all you need to make sure is ticked is the reg_IBLite.txt. If there is a reg_IB2go.txt, then that will get distributed if you have that ticked. Otherwise, it doesn't hurt if the tick is left ticked and you don't have the license in the redistribution. But best practice is just to remove that. And that's it. You're then ready to build your application and run it with IB Lite. Now, there's full details of the steps on docwiki.embarcadero.com. If you follow the interface pages there, you'll be able to find the full steps of the registration. Now, to connect to Interface is as simple as using some of the database components that are provided with RAD Studio. So you can use the FIDAC components or you can use the IBX components. They work in a very similar manner. Here we're just showing the FIDAC ones. So you have the FIDAC connection, and then you have the query table, stored procedure to connect up to. There's also a transaction component if you want to explicitly manage transactions. IBLite follows IBX follows exactly the same model, where the only difference really on the database connection component from IBX, there's an option to say that it's the embedded driver. With FIDAC, there's a physical IB driver link that you put down in the application, and there you say that you're using the Lite edition, and that connects up to the embedded drivers. The other thing that you do need to use with FIDAC is a weight cursor, a GUI X weight cursor, and that will then manage the screen cursor for you automatically. But with both, you set the parameters, you tell it where the database is, the username password is sysdba master key if you're using the default one. Obviously, we would highly recommend that you put your own username and password onto the database. So that's about it in terms of the setup. I think best really just to get in and see this in operation. So let's start with our data module, and we've got a really simple application here that is able to run out onto Windows, Mac, iOS, Android using the C++. We have the same sample that we'll be showing on the Object Pascal one, but written with Pascal. But we've got some basic components here. and let's start with the data module. So on the data module we have our database connection, and at the moment I've got login prompt set for true just to be able to allow me to log into whatever database I want to connect to. On here, a number of options that we can set up. The plan of this session is not to go through all the details about FIDAC, but it's a very powerful database engine for connecting to multiple different data sources, including connecting to local files and loading those in and working with them locally. With Interbase, we then have our physical IB driver link, which we've set to be light to true, and we've also added our GUIX wait cursor. Now, because this is going to be run in a FireMonkey project, we've set the provider to be FMX rather than console or forms. And this basically just allows us to define what happens when the cursor is needing to change to indicate to the end user that something's happening in the application. So on our main form, we've then got here our query, which is connected up to our database. We have our bind source, which is connected to the query. And if we just right click here and choose to bind visually, and let's just lay this out. We can see here that we have a grid, which is connected up to the bind source, and a navigator, which is down here. So this is just literally used to display the output of our query. Over on the left here, we've got a memo, which is going to be used to put an SQL statement into, which we're then going to run. So we're literally just going to take the string that's been typed in, check to see if it starts with select, and if it does, then we'll open the query. If it doesn't, then we'll execute the query. We also have here an item click that is going to be used from our little menu here. So let's just go back to the design surface. We can see in the structure pane here we're using one of the new components in XE7, which is the multi-view, which is hidden at the moment. And on the multi-view there is a list view here, which has got an on-click event just to load in select star from table name. The list view will contain the list of tables which it gets at the point that we connect to the database, which is another button on the multi-view. And here we can see that we're just checking to see if there's a full colon in the path. If there is, then we know we're connecting across the network or to a physical location of a drive. So we can then just skip adding tables to this demo, and we'll just take whatever's in the current database that we're connecting to. Otherwise, we're just going to use a quick check to see if we're running on Windows, and if so, we're going to create a database in a data folder. Otherwise, we'll actually create one in the documents path for the platform that we're running on. So this code here, gets documents path, will actually work on Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android. On Windows, you need to have the right permissions set up for creating documents in the document path. So hence we're just using a slightly different path here. And then once we have the database path, we're literally going to connect to the database. If we need to add tables, then we'll go create some sample tables and insert some random data. And here we're using ArrayDML, which allows us to set the array size of a query that we're running. And then rather than executing for every insert, we're going to use the ArrayDML to execute all of them together. And this is so much faster than inserting them one by one, because it packages it all up and delivers it in one big block to the database. So really, really useful that we can use ArrayDML with Interbase. So once we have some sample data in there, if it's a brand new database, or if we've connected to a database and we've got the list of tables, we're then literally just going to loop through the tables and put them onto the screen, which will then complete our UI. That's about it. There really isn't anything particularly complicated here. So let's have a look at what we've needed to do on the setup side to actually create IB Lite into our projects. So under Projects, Deployment, Okay, so let's just compile. Under Feature Files, we've selected Interbase to Go. Now, Interbase to Go covers the Interbase to Go and also the IB Lite. There's two options in here for different registration files though, so just uncheck the registration file that you want, or don't want, sorry. So we're not deploying an IB to Go license here, just a free IB Lite license, so that's the only one we have ticked. We actually only have one license on this machine anyway, so it would ignore the one that it can't find if you do forget to do it. Just to show again, typically under your users, public documents, under Embarcadero, there's an Interbase folder, a redistributable folder with Interbase version in there, and then you can see the registration file gets put there. So when you get the registration file, you just need to rename it reg_IBLite, put it in there, and that will then automatically pick up and deploy with your projects. So deploy it to different platforms. You just choose where you want to deploy it from, also to. Here we've got Mac set up. We can also choose Windows. Now, one thing that's quite nice to do on Windows is actually to use the PA server. So what I'm actually going to do here, I was just checking my IP address earlier. I'm just going to minimize my IDE. And let's go to Documents. Sorry. Go to C, Program Files, Embarcadero, and I've installed the PA server. PA server is distributed in the Embarcadero Rad Studio folder. In fact, let's just show you where that is. Under Program Files, Embarcadero Studio. And then the latest version, you'll find there's a PA server folder in here. The installer for Windows and Mac is both located in the same folder here. I'm just going to start the PA server for my Windows machine here. And in fact, I'm kind of sort of debugging locally in this respect. This is also great for debugging to remote machines. But if I want to actually now use this for Windows, I can just edit the connection, set it to be running out to my local PA server, which is now running, and at the point I go and choose Run. That's now going to package up my application and deploy it locally through PA server, and now I can go ahead and I can create and connect to a new database, which then got the foo and the fee data in there, and you can see as you select the item, it's then just running the SQL statement. Or I could actually choose to connect to, I've got a database on here, which is the Bible IB, which has got different data in here. So again, really easy to be able to connect to existing databases and work through there. So that used IB Lite as a client to actually remotely connect back. So let's actually have a look at the same thing running. This time let's run it out onto the Mac. So we're just going to go run OS X. And this time I'm using PA server on the Mac. And now I can go ahead and I can connect to my local database. Here I can see my data. Now what I can do is I can connect back to my to my PC. So let's go and connect into my instance of Interbase that's running down here, and go to C data. We've got the Bible on there, but let's go ahead and just check what the IP address is. (172.168.161.161.93). And then we just put a full colon to say that that's the name of the machine we're going to, and then we put the location on that machine we're going to. So we're going to go to C data, Bible.ib, and we can connect in and we can then see the same data from that remote database. So that's great. We can also now obviously use this as a client for iOS and Android as well, and run out onto those platforms. So let me connect up to my iPad and let's have a look at that running. So to connect up to my iPad, I'm just going to go to the project manager here and choose iOS device. And under my targets, I can select my iPad, which is plugged in. And if it's not showing, just right click here and refresh, and that will refresh your list. Now, in terms of code changes, there's actually nothing I need to do to change my code here. It's the same database, it's the same components, everything's the same, it's the same deployment options. The only thing that you might need to do is, if you can see here that we have different types of startup folders for different platforms. So if we go to here and have a look at maybe Android, you can see it's assets internal interface, whereas for iOS it's startup documents interface. So if you are deploying a database with your application, you can just add the file here, and you might just need to set the remote path part to match in with your current deployment, and that makes sure your database file is safely pushed along with your application. But for deploying this out now, and because we're creating the database on the fly here, we don't actually need to make any changes. So let's just go ahead and run this. So as this is compiling and running out to my iPad, I'm just going to jump to my Windows machine here and open up, sorry, my Mac machine, and open up Reflector. Now Reflector allows me to show what's going on my iPad on the screen here. So let's just share my screen. Come on here, I can connect to my database, and there's my local data. I'm able to modify and work with my local data. Or the other thing that I can do is I can connect back to my Windows machine. So I'm just going to make sure I've got bridge networking on and grab the IP address for that machine. Okay, so my IP address now is 10.70.5.27, and this is now at what I'm going to look for is the C for colon / data, and I can go and connect to the same database again, and now we can see that I'm actually collecting the remote data directly from the machine that I'm connected up to. Now, as I say, really the use case for this is very much if you're using an iPad or a tablet in a kiosk, or if it's within a local network, so you know you're always going to be connected to the same hotspots, connections across multiple hotspots. You're really best using REST for your data. So I hope you've enjoyed having a look at Interbase IB Lite and seeing the power and capabilities that you have there with Interbase. Obviously, it's great being able to have a single database platform that we can run across all platforms that we develop on, and this gives us complete end-to-end coverage, easy porting of our applications across to multiple platforms as well. Really means that we can write our data layer logic once and get it everywhere. And with easy upgrade options to move to full encryption and unlimited disk space support, there really is no reason why you shouldn't be using IB Lite today in your applications, especially if you're looking to replace any paradox tables or looking for solutions for proper data storage on mobile and desktop applications. Now, before we get to some Q&A, I just want to give a quick shout out for the @Interbase account on Twitter. We have some really exciting stuff that we are going to be bringing to you later through the year. Some of it you may have seen earlier on the product address, but please do keep in touch with us on the Twitter account, because we're going to be announcing product releases and exclusive access to some of the betas and so on through the Twitter account there. as well as the community at Embarcadero.com. But I know a number of you on Twitter nowadays, so please do follow us on at Interbase on Twitter. But now Q&A.
A couple questions, Stephen, and then everyone else in the track, you can key in questions if you want. IB Lite is available now on Windows and OS 10 in addition to iOS and Android, right?
Yeah, so we originally provided IB Lite as a way for developers to get really cheap, well, free database access and storage on iOS and Android as those platforms came out. And the success of it there, we kind of looked and said, well, hey, let's get this over to Windows as well. So it's there for Windows and Mac as well now, which is great because you now have the same free data storage across all the platforms, and it's a great alternative to using Paradox tables or other local kind of storage, and you get all the kind of the great features of the core Interbase kernel in there, with the the ACID compliance and the easy recovery and up and going. So it's it's great to get it out to the other platforms as well now.
And then, Stephen, if I start with IB Lite, I go in there, I put my reg key, IB Lite, I go into the feature files and say I want IB Lite, for example. Is it just replacing the reg key with Interbase to go key and doing a rebuild of my application and redeploy? Is that the migration process to go from IB Lite to the full feature-rich encryption options, all that of IB to go?
Okay, so the Interbase database is the same binaries for Interbase to go and IB Lite. So they're only literally controlled by the license file. So you don't even have to rebuild your application. You can just do an in-app purchase, or you can just distribute somehow to the customer the Interbase to go license file, and they can put that down into the directory, and we'll pick that one up and use that instead. So obviously you can do that programmatically. So yeah, you don't even have to rebuild. You can just deploy it out. You will need to just say to the database that you want to turn the encryption on at that point. It doesn't turn it on automatically, but it will then expand obviously beyond 100 megs automatically for you as soon as you've got Interbase to go there.
And make sure I'm clear. When I use I get my reg key, it's got numbers and whatever in its file, and I rename it reg.
Yeah.
Whatever the text name is, or whatever name I want to call that file. I just replace it in the app bundle, or if I have put it somewhere else.
Well, there's two file names. There's the reg_IB Lite and reg_to go, and basically you can call it either of them. It just picks up the license file and then it reads the license file and decides what it can do. So if you put both of them there, it will use the to-go one because that has the best capabilities for your application. So if you deploy both, then it will bypass the IB Lite one and just use the to-go one. If you want to kind of just swap it out and have a common name that you use for the two, then that's fine as well. It's just the names are there to make it easy to set up the deployment options, basically.
Okay, so I can put both of them in there, and again, when the app starts up, Interbase, and I use Interbase, it will look for the most capable license option to turn on, right?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, Stephen, there's no other questions. I don't know if you want to add anything else while you have the time, or again, maybe it's 10:30 and you want to do something else. I'm not sure.
No, that's fine. Well, I'm happy to hang here for a minute, and if there's any other questions. Obviously, the one thing I would say is just, again, do go out and, if you're on Twitter, hook up to the @Interbase Twitter account. We have some exciting stuff that we shared earlier in the day in the product address, talking about change views. And change views is a new technology that we're working on for Interbase that allows you to track changes made to data and literally identify those really, really quickly and easily. And it's very, very lightweight on the database. It's exceptionally powerful technology. And we have a beta that's open for the moment for anybody who'd like to come and join us for that. We're looking to get the change views technology out this year still. So this is if you're looking at doing any kind of data, especially getting over to a mobile device, then having interface and change views on the server can be a very powerful option, because it means kind of updating your local data cache becomes a breeze all of a sudden. So yeah, definitely if you missed the product address earlier, and getting data out to remote devices, or even if it's kind of moving data between a couple of servers, is a challenge that you're kind of facing up to. This is all going to be built directly into the interface servers and available to use. So definitely go back out and check out change views from the product address on the replays, and follow us on the at interface. And I say, if you want to get involved on the beta right now, then just drop me an email over. It's just stephen.ball@embarcadero.com, and we can try and get you hooked up onto the beta as well.
So change views will be in the server editions, but not in to go or whatever. It's the server editions where you'll see that feature.
We're getting out into the server editions first. We have a lot of different editions for interface, mixed with different kind of platforms and languages and that kind of side of things. So it's the same binary files for developers, and it's the same database structure on all platforms. You can move them easily between all of them. But with all that kind of stuff, we're getting it out, let's say, on the servers first, because that's where people are telling us they need that kind of technology first. And then certainly we will be looking in the future to make sure it's available everywhere that interface sits. So.
And that brings up, again, a question for me. IBLite, I know, is one user, one transaction, no encryption, database, 100 megabytes. But if I have an application that needs two interbase databases and I'm using IBLite, can I have two 100 megabyte maximum databases, or is it one database, one user?
You can have two databases, but you can only be connected to one at a time.
So one connection to a database at a time.
Yeah.
But if parts of my application on my mobile device need one database versus putting all my tables in one database, I can open and close one connection to a database.
Yeah. So if you're out doing a whole load of field data and you knew you were going to be collecting a lot of data, then you could create a database, put it all in there, and then you go out the following day and you've got a new project, and you want to keep that data separate, then there's no problem. Create a new database. We've seen in the demo today how you can do that. Go run, work with that data, and once you're done with it, close that. If you want to review what you've done on the other one, then just reconnect to the first database. Not a problem. It's a physical database limit size, not a number of databases that you can have.
Stephen, great hearing your voice, and it was good seeing you here in Scotts Valley last week. Thanks.
Yeah, great catching up with you as well. Thanks, David.